Well, a new poll from Abacus Data has more bad news for the Trudeau Liberals. Take a look at the numbers. Nationally, Conservatives are still enjoying a double-digit lead over all other parties, claiming 43% of the committed vote share right now. Liberals come in at a distant second, down 1 percentage point, and then followed by the NDP, up 1 percentage point themselves. But take a look at what happens when you take Quebec out of the equation. Conservatives still have a commanding lead, but New Democrats come in second place, leading the Liberals by 3 points at 22%.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Boy, do these numbers for the Liberals keep going in the wrong direction for them. This poll that we're going to be taking a look at today, this was done from about 2 weeks ago with just under 2,000 individuals. But this video only came out 5-6 days ago. Now, the main reason I wanted to check it out was, even though you're seeing those stats that they just showed at the very beginning, I want you to take a listen to what the CEO says right after they display the stats and they start getting into the conversation, because to me, it makes absolutely no sense.
Well, with more on the Abacus Data poll, we're now joined by the company's founder and CEO, David Coletto. David, thank you for making the time.
Good to see you, Michael.
Okay, so let's begin here with the NDP, because, you know, from a layman's perspective, this seems to be fairly huge. The party is now leading the Liberals countrywide when you factor out Quebec numbers. How devastating is that for the Trudeau Liberals?
Well, it's devastating in two ways, I think. One, in the sense that, well, now they're trailing the NDP, a party that, you know, is fourth place in the House of Commons and is, from all the other research we've done, you know, they share the biggest pool of voters who are open to voting for either of them. So they're their direct competitor in trying to attract that progressive voter. But it's devastating, I think, for a psychological reason, in that there are lots of Canadians who don't want Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives to win the next election, probably a majority of the country.
Huh? So you have your own polling data that shows the Conservatives have been at 43%, and if Quebec's out, they're at 50% of voter intention, and you're saying majority of the country don't want Conservatives in power, when like 85%, if not more, of Canadians have said that they're ready for a Conservative government, that this blue wave is going across Canada. What is this guy talking about? How can he be saying this kind of a statement with the data that he's collecting? And this is something that I had a problem with the last time we talked about these polls with Vassy, when she kept saying to Andrew Scheer, a vast majority of Canadians don't want an early election
of this Liberal government, and give Canadians an opportunity to choose a different way.
What those two polls tell me, though, however, Mr. Scheer, is that a majority of Canadians, while yes, are definitely suffering, would like their government to work together and their politicians to work together to address those issues. 56% of Canadians, according to Ipsos, don't want an early election. Nano's polling, 54% of Canadians want the NDP and the Liberals to actually stay in that deal they had in order to avoid an early election. Why are you so set on doing something counter to what Canadians are telling you they want? They actually want your party to work with other parties rather than force an election on Canadians.
When those polls were done with a sample size of 1,000 individuals, this one was done with 1,700. You can't extrapolate this and cover the whole country with such a small group of individuals. Yet when you see this stuff put on TV or online on these videos, these news networks, it makes it sound like those are the facts and not what Canadians have expressed already over and over again. But I mean, let's let this guy continue a little bit.
And so the fight over the next few months is trying to figure out who's the alternative for that. And if the New Democrats are seen increasingly by people to be that alternative, because the polls are signaling that, then you might see, not a flood of people, but more of those Liberal voters right now moving to the NDP in belief that they will be best able to stop Pierre Poilievre.
There is not a snowball's chance in hell that the NDP or Jagmeet Singh has any chance of stopping Pierre Poilievre. Maybe bypassing Trudeau, sure, that's another option for those lefties or those progressives. But a vast majority, I feel like, of individuals who would vote Liberal, I don't think would vote NDP. I've stated this before, and vice versa. I don't think a lot of people who would vote NDP would vote Liberal. there are things that they kind of align on, but majority of the time, if you are going to vote for a different party than the one you normally do, you go quite opposite. And with a lot of these liberal kids or a lot of these liberal individuals realizing how bad the economy is, how they can't afford anything, I don't think going to the NDP, who has propped up the liberals to allow this kind of gouging to continue, is the way to go. I think they would probably all switch over to most likely conservatives or maybe not vote. But there's just no way that Jagmeet is beating Pierre, let alone holding on to his own riding. I mean, if we take a look at that, they recently just changed up some of the riding maps, and for Burnaby, it's no longer, I don't think, central or south. I think it's now central, and Burnaby Central, conservatives are edging ahead, as it says here, that they're most likely going to win. But even if we look at the other Burnaby, like Burnaby North, very heavily conservative. And so this most likely is how it's going to look. You can see it's a lot of safe spots for the conservatives in British Columbia, as they claim 23 safe spots compared to the 3 of the NDP. So again, I don't think there's any way in hell that Jagmeet is going to somehow beat the conservatives or Pierre Poilievre. But I mean, he does get into it a bit. So let's take a listen.
Okay, well, we'll talk about the conservative numbers in a bit, but when you look at this, again, NDP result, when you take Quebec out, is this, do you think, a judgment on Trudeau's leadership or the party as a whole? And I ask that because I wonder if changing the Liberal leader would improve the party fortunes in any way.
Well, I think so much of just the decline in Liberal numbers is almost directly attributed to how people feel about the Prime Minister, right? As pollsters like me say, the correlation between how you view the Prime Minister and your likelihood to vote Liberal is almost perfect. If you don't like them, you're not voting Liberal, and if you like them, and there's not many left who do, most of them are going to vote Liberal. So I think in politics today, it's very hard for us to separate how we feel about the person who is the most prominent, is the leader of a party, and how we feel about that party. And so I think the NDP's gain is probably less to do with the New Democrats themselves, and probably some indication that ending the confidence and supply arrangement has allowed them maybe some space to be seen as a change agent, and the continued deterioration in the Prime Minister's personal numbers.
Okay, but when you look at the NDP number, while a lead, again, when you take Quebec out, it's not a breakaway number from the Liberals. So would that translate into more seats for the NDP or just guarantee a vote split?
Well, the bad news in this number for the New Democrats is, I don't think it generates many new seats. They're still third in Ontario. They're second in Saskatchewan and Alberta, but they're so far behind the Conservatives in both of those provinces that it's unlikely to convert into any seats. And there's probably some good news in British Columbia, but again, it's hard for us to say, is that in part because there's a provincial election going on there, or is this really solid federal NDP support? I think this is if you're the New Democrats, you're probably saying this is the first step. It's probably not hopefully the last step if you're them, but it doesn't mean they're going to win, dozens more seats. It just means, again, psychologically, maybe that's going to help consolidate some of that vote in places where the NDP is stronger than the Liberals, and the Prairies and BC right now are clearly two regions where that's the case.
Now, I will agree with him that the rise in the NDP's status, if you want to call it that, is definitely because they're separating themselves from Trudeau. People hate Trudeau, are not really happy with the Liberals right now. But again, he's not the greatest alternative. He's not much different from them in terms of his policies, what he's been doing, his support for the Liberals, even though he's torn up disagreement multiple times. But one thing that this guy said, again, the pollster saying that, or the CEO, I should say, saying that the Prairies and British Columbia are heavily NDP. BC looks like it's going to have 5 spots for NDP. The Prairies, not a lot either. So I don't understand what he's talking about. The Northwest Territories, yeah, the territories for sure are NDP heavy, but throughout the rest of the country, again, it's a blue wave coming right across. The block is always going to be the block, but outside of that, it's pretty much all blue. So I, I get it. Maybe he's just working off the data that he's collected, but when he's on national television or a program like the CPAC, which I'd say more and more people are starting to watch, it's very misleading. But now they're going to start to talk about the conservatives.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the conservative lead right now. You know, it's been in double digits for well over a year now. How hard set is that support, would you say?
Well, I think there's two ways of looking at that. I mean, when we ask voters who support the Conservatives today whether they're likely to change their mind, 6%, so a very small sliver of that 43 that they have right now, say they would likely change their mind. So that is not a lot of voters. And if they all moved over to another party, the Conservatives would still have, over 40% of the vote. But another way to look at it is when we asked them in another survey we did, is your vote for the Conservatives more about liking Mr. Poilievre, liking the Conservative Party, liking their policies, or is this more about not liking the Liberals, in particular Mr. Trudeau? And 4 out of 10 of those Conservatives say it's more about not liking the Liberals and Mr. Trudeau. And so that tells me that it's firm as long as those conditions remain. As long as the Prime Minister is the leader of the Liberal Party, as long as he is the head of the top of that ballot, I think it's going to be hard for any party to start chipping away at that Conservative lead. And so I think it's increasingly over time now. It's been a year since the Conservatives opened this kind of lead. It is firming up. And unless something fundamentally changes in the political landscape, those are voters who are looking for change, and they see the Conservatives as the best vehicle to achieve that.
Well, first off, let me tell you, it's probably 10 out of 10 Conservatives don't like Trudeau or the Liberals. But even if that was the case, 4 to 10, that's the number you're going with? That's a measly 40%. That's not even a half of it. But that aside, yeah, it's not a popularity contest in terms of who's the best looking or anything like that. You want somebody who's going to be the best person for the job in terms of the prime minister running our country. It's not the popularity like Trudeau has based his whole thing off of, his looks and his suaveness and all this stuff, all the women opining over him. Like, Pierre doesn't need that. Pierre has good policies, or he'll most likely be implementing good policies. People have been very vocal that they're ready for the change. So again, this like small 6% that might change their vote, insignificant. This 4 to 10 people who openly admitted saying that they would vote Conservative simply because they don't like Trudeau or the Liberals, again, insignificant. Vast majority of the country wants a new change. They want to have a Conservative Party. So all of these polls and stats, like, the numbers are cool and it's good to see. We already know that the Conservatives are in such a lead, but when you come on to these national programs, as I said, or these television programs, and you say these kinds of things the way you say it, it manipulates the narrative to make people think like, oh, the only reason Pierre is getting in is because people hate Trudeau. It's not to say that there isn't any water to that statement. It doesn't hold any water to it, but that's not the main reason. People are tired of the crime. People are tired of not being able to afford things. I'm quite frankly sick and tired of this crazy immigration or student immigrant policies. The food bank right around the corner from where I'm at, it has blown up the amount of individuals that are there. And as I've stated before, I myself am a product of immigration, but there has to be a proper process. And who knows, hopefully Pierre can rein that in. He's expressed some plans in terms of only bringing in the set amount that we can actually work with outside of, I think, the healthcare field. But yeah, people are ready for this change, and it's very clear across the board, as I said, with the blue wave. But as always, this is just my opinion. I'd love to hear from you guys. What do you guys think about all this? This one was a little bit quicker of a video. My next video will most likely be a lot longer. There was this committee hearing that I want to cover that has a lot to go through, so that's coming up next. But as always, I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.